So exciting to be here today. My name is Marco, and I want to share today my kind of journey of coming from Herb to ReActionView and how this might be a new foundation for the view layer, how we build full-stack Ruby on Rails applications, or Ruby applications in general. But first, I also want to give a big thank you for Arena and putting on this whole event here to have us here for the next 3 days. It's going to be very exciting to hang out. And yeah, thank you so much for having us here in San Francisco. Yeah, if you haven't met, I'm Marco. I'm a full-stack engineer and open source contributor. I love open source, and I really love Ruby, as we probably all share here today, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. And I think Ruby is not just like a beautiful language, but it's also elegant, it's expressive, and it's a joy to write. And kind of my mission has been to keep Ruby as attractive as possible and as productive as possible so we can build the next generation of Ruby apps. And that's kind of why I'm really honored to be giving and opening this conference here and sharing this journey that I've been having this year. Now, I have been working a lot in Hotwire and the surrounding ecosystem, and I have been on the core teams of Stimulus, Reflex, and Cable Ready, which are kind of the predecessor to the whole Hotwire movement. And I have been on and off maintaining Stimulus too. But one thing that kind of was always core to it was the focus on developer tooling. I have been introducing the Stimulus LSP, which is a tool to help you write better Stimulus codes, a few years ago. Then I followed this up with the Turbo LSP, which was not that helpful in that sense, because we were missing some tools for it to be actually useful. And that's kind of where this whole journey to kind of Herb began and how I got introduced to figuring out this problem for that. And then kind of adjacent to that, kind of while I was working on this, I was figuring out that there's something about also rendering and how we can render our templates that might be something more to explore here. And I have to say, most of this is also inspired by the advancement in the JavaScript ecosystem, especially around TypeScript and React and how they have their awesome tooling, which is something that's, I feel like, has been really neglected. It's really, the JavaScript really nailed the developer tooling aspect. Even if the churn of these frameworks are so fast and it's really like annoying to have to work with them, I think Vite and Vue really show how it's done and how we should be doing the same thing in Ruby. And yeah, we love Ruby, so we want to keep writing Ruby. And I don't see why we shouldn't bring over these kind of advancements back to Ruby. And I have been teaching at boot camps. I have been mentoring early career engineers and helping businesses kind of adopt and grow with Hotwire. And one of the common themes was always the lack of tooling and the lack of feedback, what's going on and what's happening. It's been a common source of frustration, and it didn't really make your life so easy to work in this field, and it didn't really spark that much joy. And it's not just about the tooling itself, it's also about decisions and choices you have to make to actually build these apps. Now, Rails is famously omakase, which means you have to limit decisions. You limit the decisions you have to make because it has great defaults. That's what makes it so productive, because you don't have to kind of choose what to use for this, what to use for that. It's just like a good set of defaults. But at the same time, the industry doesn't stand still, and the expectation for modern web applications really shifted in the past few years. And also, the web platform came a long way in that time too. Just if you look at HTML and JavaScript, we got so many new features and so many new things that the browser can do now, including like import maps and custom components and web components and PWAs and so much more. The same is true for CSS. There's custom functions now in CSS. There are properties, there's nesting, the hash selector, which is super powerful to kind of avoid JavaScript sometimes. And at the same time, we also got a lot of exciting new web APIs, including the Invoker Commands API, which might be a foundation to kind of replace parts of Stimulus in the future, or the Vue Translations API to kind of have animations, but also the Speculation Rules API for helping with offline support, right built into the browser. And There's still some other issues that have been struggling with in Rails views, especially about how do you encapsulate the views, how do you organize your views, how do you reuse some of the parts of your views, but also around the performance, the testing, and the tooling. There have been solutions, and as we can see here, there have been a lot of solutions to it, and it's kind of tiring to have to figure out what do you choose out of this to make it work. And at the same time, you also have these other tools to kind of build on top of it to make it actually work in production and to make it actually an app that you can use and write code in. So I've been really wondering how we can approach this problem with the goal of making it as backwards compatible as possible, while still making it feel like it is ReActionView or like HTML-ERB as you have been writing it this whole past decades. So you can still write powerful applications and ambitious applications using the full stack aspect of it. So yeah, today I want to share how that might be able to be done with Herb and ReActionView. So I want to share how Herb came to be, how Herb can help, what can Herb do today to help with that, and kind of what's next to make this all work. So yeah, it kind of started a few years ago when I was working on stimulus stuff. I was frustrated by the experience of stimulus, how it doesn't tell you anything about what's wrong. So let's say you have this controller, it's a user profile controller, this lives in your regular app, how it is today. Now, this is a simple controller, it has just a connect function and a console log in it to say something when it's connected. So we go to our view, we use this controller now, reference it, open our browser, and then we expect this log to message to show up. But, well, it doesn't. But our connect clearly says it should be logging something when it's connecting. But the thing is, we have been saying user underscore profile controller here, but it should be user dash profile. We should be using the dasherized version. But nothing in this whole stack told you that something is wrong about this code. And these mistakes happen so easily and are so common throughout this whole ecosystem that it doesn't really tell you, A, something is wrong, but also B, what is wrong. And like C, it doesn't even tell you that it's just you have no feedback at all. And to kind of help with that, at RailsConf a few years ago, I introduced the Stimulus LSP, which was focused around this whole ecosystem of developer tooling enhancements in that talk. So yeah, Stimulus LSP was this tool to help you write better code. It's available for all major editors that support the language server protocol. And it just gives you these kind of options and kind of autocomplete to help write these controllers. And if you have typos, it will also tell you that something is wrong about it. The problem was this was HTML only. There was no support for ERB in that sense. So what you have in HTML in this way would work, but if you had something like this in ERB or like tag helpers, it wouldn't tell you anything again. So it was just kind of a blind spot again. So we had this missing support for HTML ERB. And then the same was true for Turbo. And Turbo uses a lot of tag helpers, uses a lot of Ruby helpers to make this work with the turbo frames, the turbo streams, and so on. So you wouldn't really have anything to work with because, yeah, it doesn't understand that. And then finally, we had the idea to also have ERB support in the Ruby LSP, which we kind of were prototyping at RubyKonf Hack Day a few years ago. And we quickly realized that we can build something that works, but it wasn't really nice to work with and really powerful as we would need it. So there were kind of these few use cases where we were like, it would be cool to have something more powerful. And I had tried to do that. We had some working solutions, but it was mostly failed attempts that was frustrating. So I wanted to tackle the bigger picture. I wanted to see if you can write a new parser for HTML-aware specifically, or to put differently, an ERB parser that's HTML-aware, like it understands its surroundings. So it has the structural awareness of these templates to kind of help you write these controls or views. So earlier this year, I started working on this after a few years of not doing it, but then I had a reason to do it because I had to give a talk at RubyKaigi. So I had to, so I was like, yeah, this is a good idea to do a deadline with a conference because then you have to get it done right into the time. And luckily it worked out. The Herb parser released as part of this talk. I cannot go into all the details of how this works, but if you want to see how this works, check out the talk from RubyKaigi. But the idea was, it's this ecosystem of tools specifically built for HTML ERB, a parser, a format, and a linter. We just shipped the parser that talk, and then later at RailsConf, I had enough time to then make it work to also ship the linter, the formatter, and the language server. And while working on this, a lot more things kind of came up that we needed to have this whole like ecosystem of tools to make it work under the hood, even like internal libraries. And this already is kind of a rich ecosystem by itself. So I want to kind of show you now how Herb can help you today to make the most out of it. The design philosophies are, it should be no setup, it should be low config, so you cannot really over-configure the stuff. And it should just work even if you have nothing installed in your application. So where do you start? I would recommend with the language server. So you can use this in any editor today. There's a Herb language server. If you're using VS Code or Cursor, there's a plugin in the store. If you're using Z, there is already built in. It's right there if you have the Ruby extension. If you're using NeoVim, as of the latest version, you can just say vim LSP enable, and it will just enable the LSP for you. And what this gives you is a feedback of closing tags missing. You have syntax errors that will give you feedback. But also, since it's using the Prism parser, it will tell you about if something wrong about your Ruby code itself inside the ERB tags. And since this is running in your editor, you get feedback immediately and right away as you're typing out these templates, which is really helpful in the way of iterating and writing code. Then the Herb linter is kind of meant to help you write better views. And for Ruby, we have this Ruby style guide, which kind of RubyKaigi is trying to implement and enforce sometimes too, I guess, aggressively. But it's still good to have a tool like that you can configure and make use of. But we don't really have anything for how you write good views and how to make that work. So you want to have a guide to help people towards the best practices, avoid common mistakes, enforce some style consistencies, and also maybe help with accessibility if you can enforce some of these rules and kind of guide people to think about these things. So yeah, if you have the LSP installed, you get all these linter warnings right in your editor, and it will tell you about HTML, ERB, or even about Herb itself, the way you use it, about these linter issues. And as of a few releases ago, it's also detecting the control flow. It understands your whole files. In this case, it's showing you about potential duplicate IDs on the page that it can tell you there's something wrong about this. It's not perfect in all cases yet, but it's still a good idea. It gives you a good idea about what could be wrong. The cool thing is you also get the links. So if you click on this link here in the diagnostic, you will go to documentation. It will show you why this is important and why that helps. It will show you examples of what's good and how it's badly used. And it will also show you right in the docs how or what's wrong about it and where it's wrong about things, which makes it super easy to follow why this is not good. Today we have over 50 linter rules, and there's more than 60 that we have ideas for. And if you have any ideas from your applications, please open an issue and we can see if we can make it work. And then finally, the formatter. The idea here is that you can just write your views and it will auto-format your code. The idea is you give it any arbitrary HTML ERB and it will format it beautifully if you save the file in the language server or if you run the CLI, and it will format it for you. If you have the LSP and save the file, it will just work. If you save it, it will just format it as you would expect. Since it understands the whole thing, there's no issues about indentation, no issues about any weird thing that you might encounter, or it just understands the full structure and can format it appropriately. Both the linter and the formatter have a CLI, and the CLI will also show you the offenses in the console. And it's as easy as running these two commands to run the linter or the formatter without installing anything. Now, it's using NPX here, but you don't have to have Node in your project. It's just about your local environment, if you have to have Node there. But the project doesn't depend on it, or it has to depend on it. Which also makes it super easy to run in CI by just adding these few lines in CI, and it will just work. And now with the latest release, Herb 08, we also got the Tailwind plugin built in, so you have the Tailwind classes, if you save the file, it will format them in the way you expect for the recommended order that Tailwind provides. There is a --fix command for the linter, so it will show you which ones are autocorrectable, and it will autocorrect them for you if it can. And there's also the fix on save in the language server. Without it formatting the whole document, it can fix the linter, for instance, by itself without messing with the rest of the format of the document. So if you just want to use the linter, this will work without using the formatter. We have a herb YAML file now, so you can configure the way you use it for the linter and the linter rules and the formatter. You can write custom linter rules if you want to, and you can disable offenses right in the file itself. And there's a lot more here that I cannot talk about all today, but if you want to check out what's all new in this release, I have written a detailed blog post in What's New in Herb 08. But so far, this has all been about tooling, and working on these tools made me realize something. The thing is that if you have the introspection about all these things, about how these templates are structured, you can also try to render and evaluate them and maybe try to enhance how this works. And that's been my RailsWorld talk earlier this year, where I introduced a new Herb engine that is able to render HTML ERB files. It's a HTML-aware ERB rendering engine, and it tries to be a ERB engine API compatible, which means it's using Herb, the parser, on the hood to parse the templates, and therefore ensures that you have valid syntax. And we want to kind of help with this case here too. So if you have an error in your templates, it doesn't just show you this whole page, and you have to know that this is wrong here. Because the thing is, the parser already knows where it's wrong. It already tells you right in your editor where it's wrong. So let's bring this to the browser and also show you that nice error page in the browser to say, on this line, this is wrong. That's how it works. And since we control the full rendering now, we can also inject some additional debug attributes in development. So we can add additional attributes here to say, here's the file name. And if you now add some CSS for it, we get outlines in the browser about these view files. We can add a type, which means we will get different colors for the different types, for components, partials, and views. And if we go a step further, we can also say, let's add the relative path to it. So when you hover over these labels, it will tell you which is the file in your project and how this works. Now, one more attribute for the full path on your disk, on your local machine. So when you click on the labels, it will bring you right into the file in your editor that you have configured, which makes it super easy to debug and figure out where stuff is defined and happening in your app. Then we have this debug menu that we show you by default when you render an app using the Herb engine. And in this case, we toggle the ERB outlines, which means it will tell you which parts of this page are rendered dynamically using ERB. And we have this option for revealing the tag on hover. So when you hover over these tags, it will tell you what part of ERB was used to render this output. And this now works for pretty much anything on the page as long as you are using ERB. The cool thing here, it also supports the jump to source. So if you click on any of these outlines, it will bring you not just to the file, but also to the line and the column in your document. So you know exactly where stuff is coming from. And this is really valuable in the terms of feedback and the feedback loop and how you work in these apps. And the kind of neat thing about this now is that if you have this in your editor, it's the same parser and kind of pipeline understanding this. So you have the exact errors that the parser will give you, or I guess the engine will give you when you try to render it, but you have this all right in your editor built in, and you don't have to worry about going to the browser, reloading the page, and seeing what's wrong about it. So it will tell you right away. This makes it a lot more accurate in an instance, and kind of what we did now is taking ERB from a string templating engine to it being a HTML templating engine. Which is just to say that our engine now understands the HTML structure around it. And that's kind of the part that shipped with the RailsWorld talk, to have these outlines, to have these different, the engine itself, but also the way of the enhanced messages in the browser. So now we have the tooling figured out and the rendering figured out, and I guess the question is, yeah, what's next? At least in typical Rails app, you have ReActionView, but you also have other frameworks that have other pipelines and where you can maybe improve things. But the idea is, at least for now, to try to see how we can level up how ReActionView works. Maybe we can see if we can reimagine how ReActionView works. Maybe try to re-engineer some of the parts now that we have more knowledge about how stuff works, and see if we can maybe even make it reactive. And that's kind of the idea of this whole ReActionView, that we want to have an initiative to explore what we could do in the view layer. And I shared this vision at RailsConf, this 6 adoption level I called it, and we are shipping the first 2 now to have the better error messages and the engine now. And what ReActionView does today for you is it integrates the Herb engine into Rails applications. You can use Herb engine independent of Rails, that works. ReActionView is just here now to make the glue code work to use in Rails apps. So all you have to do is add ReActionView, run the generator. You will get an initializer. You can say, I want to intercept all my ERB files to use the Herb engine, and you will get the menu and all these tools right built in. So this just works out of the box. And in the future, we might also be able to enhance it for Rails specifically to also show you about how long it took to render a certain part of the page, about how long this partial took to render visually in the browser. And this is kind of inspired by, obviously, the console output that you have in your log. So we can maybe even make it so you can see how many allocations there were, how many SQL queries that were running for this specific part of the page, so you can eliminate them. It will just tell you where this stuff might be happening, which is super useful. This is not shipping yet, but that's kind of stuff we can build now that we have these tools. And there's more levels that we can support and more we can do. I'm not going over all of them in depth, but I will kind of give you an overview. So ReActionView optimizations, I feel like there is more things you can do, especially about performance and inlining how parsers are rendering. And maybe even trying to minify the insignificant white space, so it's less to ship and less to kind of compile. So maybe there's stuff there. Not sure it makes a difference, but it's something to explore. Then the reactive templates, which is kind of the idea of taking inspiration from Phoenix Live View, from Stimulus Reflex, from other libraries like it, and try to bring them back into Rails now that we have more knowledge about how these tools work. There's a possibility that we can maybe even try to do some client-side rendering now, because we can maybe transpile some of these things. If we limit the set of ERB you can use, you might be able to do ERB client components, whatever that is called, I don't know. Maybe it transpiles to a web component, maybe it transpiles to a React component. It could be anything, really. And the final one would be to say we have external components, so you can use React or Vue components right in your ERB views as they just work. This kind of meant that you don't have to abandon the HTML ERB or the ReActionView approach altogether, but you can say on certain pages, I want to use this more advanced thing. The idea here is, like we have with import maps Rails, where you can pin dependencies, you can say, I want to import these components from these packages or from my local folder and expose them to our Vue context. And then the engine knows how this stuff works, and you might just be able to use those in your regular views. It knows how to hydrate them, it knows how to mount them, and knows how to just deal with them, because it knows about the context. There's maybe even a possibility to try to plug inertia into this, or have inertia call that, or make it work together somehow, I don't know. But it's something to explore to see what is possible here. If you want to kind of see the full vision of how it works, this is the RailsConf talk. If you want to check that out, that's there. But yeah, if you are building ambitious apps in that space, and I think this work is important, I am looking for companies that want to support this as strategic partners. So I have companies to work with to kind of shape this idea and shape how this might look like in the future. So yeah, please get in touch if you are interested in that kind of tooling. But yeah, to conclude, the Prism Ruby parser has had a big effect on the ecosystem at large, and also the tooling because Ruby LSP is using it now, Ruby internals itself are using it now to compile Ruby code you're running. And I think the same can be said, or can be true for how Herb works and how templates are rendered and compiled. The Herb project started as a parser initially. I didn't plan for it to be this whole set of tools. It was just like naturally that came out of it. And I feel like already now, even if you don't do more on this side with rendering, I feel just like the tooling aspect is really valuable already. And just having this there unlocks a whole set of different tools to be built, or new tools to be built on top of it. And I think it already shows what could be possible just from this, what we could build and do more now, and the way we can push boundaries now with these tools. The Ruby community itself has built awesome tools for Ruby itself for the longest time. It's always been great to work in Ruby. Even if you think about the error messages and the debug console on an error screen that you can just interact with, it's really nice to have these tools. And I feel like it's now time to bring that same care to the view layer, so you have the same power in the view layer in how you build full-stack apps. And I feel like with Herb and ReActionView, we have a path forward to make that work. And Herb Engine itself, I think, can even be for the greater Ruby ecosystem a valuable tool. So this doesn't have to be specifically for Rails. It can be for any framework that understands or uses ERB. And that's the thing. Like at the beginning of this year, I didn't plan to work on this. I didn't know that I was working on this at all. I didn't have this on my bingo card to say I am writing a HTML ERB parser and an ecosystem on top of it, and especially not in C. So this parser is written in C for a reason of portability. So we can run it from Node, we can run it from Ruby, we can run it in the browser even. And I think it just shows that on-demand learning is really powerful if you use it right. Projects like these allow you to learn new skills and languages. And before this project, I haven't written any C before. This is my first C project. And I also haven't dealt with C extensions before. But I think if you have a problem to solve, you will find the right tools to make it work. And it's also been a great excuse to learn about WebAssembly and how that works, because, well, it compiles to WebAssembly and runs in the browser, which is really cool. This whole project is a mix of languages, also to make it kind of compatible with other ones. And I think it's quite unique in the way how this works, and to be able to, they can work on these languages now, which is kind of a big learning, a big inspiration to do more, because it's cool to see other languages, how they work, how this ecosystem works, and bring back these ideas back to Ruby. But yeah, I think it really shows that if you have a bit of dedication and a bit of time, it shows what this can yield and the way it can influence the whole trajectory now of how templating languages work in Ruby. And also the whole developer experience around it, which hasn't been great for Ruby for the longest time. We are, I think, catching up now, but I think it's really awesome now to see people adopting it, people liking it, people loving it, and seeing it for the first time in their own app and it working. And it's been really magical to see people experience that for the first time. So yeah, I hope this talk has given an overview of what Herb can do and its potential in the future. So if you can do anything, please give it a try in your apps. See if it breaks your app. If it breaks, great, then you have something to work on. And it just helps improve the whole ecosystem for all of us. And finally, I want to thank all these people that have been working in some way or form to make this work what we have today, including all the contributors to the Herb project itself. They have been awesome to send patches, open pull requests, open issues. And finally, also a big thank you for all the supporters on GitHub sponsors who have been supporting this journey all the way through. So if you can do anything, please give it a star on GitHub, or check out the docs on herbtools.dev. With this, I believe there is a bright future for the Ruby frontend story, and I want you to build the future with Ruby, with these tools, ideally. So you don't have to abandon the whole full stack in Rails or in Ruby, but you can use these tools to build more ambitious applications. So build your new applications in Ruby, build new open source in Ruby, and share it with the community. And with a bit of dedication and time, you can build awesome things, even if it seems daunting in the beginning. Be the change you want to see in the world, and that's what I have for today. Thank you so much.